We return once again to Factions Abridged, a little look at the main storyline of the Factions campaign and the continent of Cantha in anticipation for the release of the Guild Wars 2 sequel expansion. So, we are at a weird part of the story now where we've dealt with Shiro and he's gone, but we've been told he might come back, IDK when, go unify the Kurziks and Luxons. Really kind of weird, but we are starting today here at the Echovald Forest. I thought this would be a nice place to go to. The strategy guide in particular actually lists the Eternal Grove as the next mission. So, hey, I'll go with their selection in there. Not that that's necessarily real. Maybe they're just doing like a left to right thing. But essentially, since the last part, we, as a player, have been able to declare ourselves for one side or the other. You get to spend a lot of time mingling with the people, so you can hang around their capital town. So for the Luxons, that's their Cavalon. You get to go to various maps, I think 3 explorable maps. A couple of optional outposts. You get to experience, obviously, a good amount of their challenge mission, and you also get to do one of 2 or both even of these competitive missions for Aspenwood and the Jade Quarry. Once you've decided if you're going to be Luxon, or the equivalent would have been to do the same over here in the Echovald Forest, maybe do some vanquishing or some side quests. Of course, when Factions first came out, vanquishing was not a feature yet, so that wasn't actually a mechanism available to you. And to tell the truth, on your first playthrough, you don't have access to hard mode anyway, so that's kind of more of just a sidebar. Once you've done that, you can declare yourself and actually go deeper down into their territory. So for the Echovald Forest in particular here, what that means is the Brower Academy here, the Drazic Thicket, as we come down to the Eternal Grove. Once we beat the Eternal Grove, we unlock the final areas of the forest, which are all pretty cool. Why are we here at the Grove itself? Well, the primary quest we did, we escorted some noble heroes of the Kurzik people down here because they wish to become Juggernauts. So Juggernauts are big, green, badass titans that the Kurziks manufacture. They take members of their citizenry and purge them of all sin, you're going to see the description is in a second, and turn them in body into these planty creatures that will fight for them. They remain intelligent and they keep their own personality, but they are changed in body. So in many ways, this process is a lot like what Guild Wars 2 revealed the creation of the Exalted to be like, which I've always found quite interesting. Guild Wars has got a rich history of constructs in its lore and transformation and manipulation of souls and whatnot, and this is kind of another example of something like that. The Kurziks in particular actually believe that there's some godly influence involved with this. They use their Juggernauts to fight against the Luxons. Mainly, the Luxons have their giant siege turtles, and the Kurziks employ their giant Juggernauts in opposition. The Juggernauts can flip over the turtles in these competitive missions and so on, and they're kind of, you know, the yin and the yang to one another. So in this mission, we learn about how the Juggernauts are built, because we are a Kurzik now, and we seek to help them out. So check it out. Baron Mirik Vasberg here says, "Welcome to the Eternal Grove. We are gathered here for the Awakening, a ceremony that few have had the privilege of witnessing. Volunteers who sacrifice themselves to become Juggernauts are our greatest assets against the Luxons. The latest situation is this, that you gain the trust of the Kurziks while fighting alongside them at Fort Aspenwood and the Jade Quarry. You are put in charge of a gathering of the Tree Singers, as well as the volunteers who would give up their mortal existence to become Juggernauts during the Awakening ceremony." So we'll learn about these Tree Singers. They're basically the people that help to make the Juggernauts as a part of the ritual. We're going to find out this idea of this great tree. I think it's here. It's called the Forever Tree. I'm not confusing that with a specific tree in Alona, I think. But the Juggernauts are created at this special place here in the forest, and the Tree Singers must, like, sing to the trees to make it happen. And this mission is about defending them, basically. What's the situation? We're aware of Shiro's defeat, and are again focused on our war with the Luxons. See, this is a weird line, as though they ever stopped with their war. Maybe for a brief moment to give us the spear and the urn, but not really. The Awakening ceremony must begin. This ceremony is a holy one. Brave and selfless Kurziks sacrifice their flesh and mortality to become bound to the Forever Trees. They become immortal guardians, so long as the trees live. Now, this is another thing that's similar to the Exalted, right? When humans became exalted in the name of Glint's legacy, they became immortal, and you can actually interact with you know, long-standing human characters. Well, a similar thing is going on here. So when we think about the Guild Wars 2 expansion, It's like the Oni to me. I think a Guild Wars 2 expansion for Cantha that doesn't have Oni would be a massive failure. And equally, a Guild Wars 2 expansion in Cantha that doesn't have Juggernauts and doesn't have Siege Turtles would also be a big failure. What's important to note about both Juggernauts and Siege Turtles is they don't necessarily have anything to do with the Jade Wind. They could have been making Juggernauts from long before when this all got petrified. And in fact, I think one of the kind of story ideas here is that the Kurziks are really happy and feel blessed that they can continue to make Juggernauts even though the Jade Wind has destroyed most else. These are not stone creatures. Juggernauts are not made of stone, they're made of plant. And equally, the turtles, you know, they're not jade turtles, they're just turtles that are roaming around, and if this all becomes water again, maybe these giant turtles will be in their element. In fact, one thing, this is probably better saved for a Luxon episode, but I might forget it by then. One thing I've been very struck by recently is one of the early trailers for Guild Wars 2 ended with like a stinger scene showing a great beast swimming through the water, and then it cuts to black. And that beast never really got implemented in Guild Wars 2 in the end. They just didn't do it. I like the idea of, if we're going to a Cantha expansion that's very deep sea dragon associated, deals a lot with the docks around the city, deals maybe with a newly watered Jade Sea, I like the idea of ArenaNet trying to go back to creating those titanic big creatures again. And if they did, they could make the turtles like a cool thing, you know, like this idea that as we're swimming around, we see these enormous things. Guild Wars 2 does it a little bit already, like with the whales that you can find in Blood Tide Coast, but come on, they can do so much better. So I'm quite excited about that. Really, really big turtles that are actually swimming around. We get to experience them underwater. Anyway, back to the Juggernauts. We can ask for guidance about the impending mission. I'm lagging. You know, guys, I tried to record this this video a second ago, but I was lagging so bad I stopped, rebooted my PC, thought it'd fix it, and it really hasn't. What district am I in? I'm in Europe, English 1. Maybe Guild Wars is just having some weird lag issues. That might affect this cutscene in an ugly way, but hey. So let's watch the cutscene and see what we got.
It's been a long time since we bested Shiro.
I was thinking the same thing. I fear his return will not be long in coming.
You worry about things that will never come to pass.
Shiro is still a threat. The affliction will return.
Nonsense. Shiro is gone once again, and with him the affliction. You should know, you were there.
Yes, but
Shiro is in the past. We must be mindful of the present. The Luxons are the biggest threat to us Kurziks, and it is to them we must shift our focus.
Baron Vesperg! Baron Vesperg!
What news?
Baron, the Luxons have breached the forest. They're on the march as we speak.
To the Eternal Grove! Protect the Forever Trees! Kill the Luxon invaders!
So this is the grove itself. You see these trees are they're glowing and magical and extremely verdant and lush. They're unaffected by the Jade Wind, and that's what we're defending. You know, so another real problem with the way that they structured the faction storyline. Look at this, we're lagging so bad that the loading screen's not even going through. Another big problem with the way that they did this was they've now made the story all about, like, Luxons v Kurziks and unifying them and really going deep into their conflict. But tacitly, oh, we made them an ally a minute ago, but they really hand-wave how we made them an ally a minute ago. It just kind of doesn't work at all. But what they really should have done instead is have us steal the urn with Danica as like a rogue element. And you could keep the convocation idea the same, really. The Luxons can hate us for taking the spear, though. Instead of being happy about it, maybe they let us enroll into their competition, confident we would never win, and then we do, and they get really annoyed with us. But in that way, we kind of underhandedly acquire these artifacts. We don't forge any kind of truce. And then we kind of lean into this nicely and comfortably under the threat of the fact we were defeated by Shiro a second ago. It'd be so easy to do that. I don't know how this game ended up like structured in such a wonky way. In any case, there you have it. I want to talk a little bit about our build as we go in. So obviously I'm not drafting anymore. I failed the challenge. But I woke up this morning thinking, man, I've just recorded like 4 missions back to back, 5 missions back to back, just using energy surge spam and, you know, just general like half optimized shadows of what everyone does in Guild Wars at the moment. So I changed my team comp a little bit here, just to some stuff that I thought might be fun I was reading about. So first of all, I'm playing a Fevered Dreams Mesmer now. Fevered Dreams was the first elite skill I ever captured in the game, and I thought it was going to be way better than it was. Many years later, and I was extremely disappointed by it. Many years later, the devs updated it, where, so what this is this is kind of like an automatic epidemic for you Guild Wars 2 players. While this hex is on them, whenever they get conditioned, all those condies get auto spread around, which is really awesome. And the buff in later years meant that if they get over 2 conditions, they also get dazed. And then Daze is ludicrously strong, just shuts down casters, and the Daze will spread. So this is a build about basically spamming loads of conditions, and then all the conditions spread out. So I've got Fever Dreams, I've got Fragility, which Livia in Guild Wars 2 uses, which means when a condition goes on that foe, they take damage. And then I put Deep Wound out, I put Cripple out, I put Cracked Armor out, I give myself energy, I'm summoning Ruby Djinn, which puts Burning out. And then for my last slot for the res, I'm actually using Biorule's Hammer, which is an AoE res on the entire team for 30 seconds, and they will die again, but in those 30 seconds, they can get more reses going and stuff. So this is just kind of a fun res skill that I haven't used for a while. As for the rest of the team, they're kind of all balanced around a really interesting concept for minion mancing, which I never knew about before. So ritualists get spawning power, which means that stuff they create is healthier. So this is the minion bomber setup that uses ritualists. So it's a low death magic ritualist. It's got 8 death magic so that I can get a lot of minions on it. But what will happen is they're actually kind of low levels, so the enemies will target the minions that this guy spawns. But because he has a lot of spawning power, they're actually fairly tanky. Now here's the real magic. If you take an actual necro with really high death magic and jagged bones, the Necro can jagged bones the Ritualist's minions that bomb and blow up. And when the minions respawn from the Necro's jagged bones, the newly spawned jagged bones are really high level from the Necro, but really tanky because they count from the Ritualist still and they get spawning power. How cool is that? Which also means that explosive growth works with them because it still counts from them. So you can have really high explosive growth from the spawning power. I mean, that's fantastic. What a cool little synergy there. Bit more cracked armor, a couple of spirits. Got another one here, which is basically going to be even stronger. Maxed out spawning power. So the minions that come from this are going to be really, really, really awesome. Aura of the Lich for even higher death magic. What else have I got? I've got Blood is Power on the back line. This is like really in vogue at the moment. Everyone seems to love Blood is Power. I think I talked about that on one of my videos on my second channel recently. And then I got like some hybrid, basically Jagged Bones characters. And again, I pulled this from, this is basically a concept someone, that there's a guy in the Guild Wars 1 community, he posts very frequently on the Guild Wars 1 subreddit and works on the PVX wiki a lot, that is really inspired. I love his buildcraft, and I've basically just taken what he did here in his concepts. But I built it into a party. I've got a Keystone Mesmer, which is basically more mass interrupts on top of the days that I was talking about before. And this guy actually uses fast casting to spam Death Novas so that the Necros don't have to do it. That would usually open them up for spamming Discord or something. I'm not quite going that route, but I like the idea of, so to speak, outsourcing the Death Nova onto Keystone. And more condies. Get a bit of blind out here. Also, more interrupts. Epidemic, actual Epidemic on this Mesmer. So the way that Fragility works is 20 damage whenever they take a condition or recover. So basically, I spam through my skill bar, spam them with condies and the whole group. And then at some point, this Mesmer is going to use Epidemic and remove all these condies all at once and AoE them again, doubling them up. So when that happens, there's a whole other wave of Fragility procs and a whole other wave of condies get loaded onto all the mobs. So there's just like this really nasty so I've got Poison from the exploding minions, Bleed from the jagged horrors. I've got like every condi in the game. I really don't think there's a condition that I'm missing. Like, every single Condi. And it's just a kind of a sort of a new minion bomb setup, which I think is really cool. And I played a little bit just before this this recording, just to make sure it's not totally horrendous. Like some hybrid healers on the back. Fun stuff. So anyway, let's head on in to the mission itself now, which... well, I'll let post-commentary me describe my thoughts on how tacky this is. So this mission is basically a wave assault defense mission. We here at the Grove itself have 3 trees to defend, and around each of the 3 trees are these singers, and it's the singers really that we've got to defend. The 3 blue bars on the top right are showing like the general health of the trees, and you've got to keep them alive. This is an interesting mission in that the master progress is not actually a time trial. And that makes sense because as a defense mission, you can't really speedrun it anyway. You're limited to the speed at which the devs spawn the mobs. So instead, it's how many singers you keep alive. And the equivalent mission at this point in the story over in the Jade Sea is something similar as well. So I kind of respect that, because the rest of factions, all the master objectives, are just do the missions quickly. This one at least changes it up a little bit. But it's slow and it's fairly uninteresting. Most Guild Wars 1 defense missions have ended up quite boring and not fun to play, to be honest, these days. Just because of power creep. Like, if you look at these first few waves I'm fighting, it's like 2 Luxon warriors. Now, I can imagine a world in which I'm trying to split my party of 8 across the different entrances. Look at that fragility spike right there. You're going to see that a lot. I can imagine a world where I'm actually doing that kind of resource management, but that doesn't happen here. I can just kind of run around and kill things almost as soon as they spawn, and then I'm standing around waiting for new ones to spawn. There will be a little moment later that I struggle, but it's not really much of a thing. So every now and then, this mission as well is in 2 phases, where the first half, we're dealing with Luxons running in and bringing their siege turtles that they plant outside the grove and siege in. So you kind of got to move outside. If you guys remember, in Prophecies, there was a very similar setup to this in the Crystal Desert defense mission at the Throne of Palentia. That's actually already been recreated in Guild Wars 2. And siege worms are on the outside. You've got to go out and deal with them. And then there's a bonus to go really far outside. This is kind of just very similar to that. And in factions already, we've seen some defense kind of stuff. Especially if you've been doing the challenge missions. You've seen defense events. So there's just not much to say, really. There are the Juggernauts themselves. And you'll see that they're defending inside the grove here. Later on, you'll see I speak to them. And what you can do is get them to follow you. So you can leave them in the grove, thus allowing more defense within the grove itself, and then you can wander off killing the siege turtles. Or you can ask them to follow you, and they'll fight alongside you, but leave, you know, the back a little bit more exposed if you're a bit too slow. But then hopefully you won't be too slow, because you've also got the power of the Juggernauts with you. The Juggernauts are kind of interesting in that they move slow. So if you do tell them to follow you, run super far out, they need some, you know, some movement speed to actually keep up. Otherwise, they don't do much. They have an interesting, like, little aura thing where when you stand next to them, you gain extra energy. I don't see how Guild Wars 2 can really recreate that side of the Juggernauts. I'd like to see the Juggernauts get the treatment in the sequel like Oakhearts did. Oakhearts are my kind of go-to example of where ArenaNet as a studio took something from Guild Wars 1 and they just took a lot of liberties with its visual design, and they took some creative freedom and they said, look, we've got Oakhearts, they're these planty creatures. I think we can do them better. And in Guild Wars 2, they did do them better. They completely redesigned the way that they look. They don't look remotely similar anymore in the sequel, 250 years later. There's no lore explanation for it. There doesn't have to be a lore explanation for it. It's just a new interpretation of what this creature looks like, and it's awesome. So the Guild Wars 1 Juggernauts, they've got a lot of powerful, interesting lore about how they're created at this grove. I'll read from the strategy guide in a second. You're going to get some juicy information there. But they don't look that cool. I mean, they look interesting. They're like a little bit bioluminescent, and they're kind of green, and they're, you know, they're broad-shouldered and they're big, but they could be way bigger, right? And I'd like to see that in Guild Wars 2. I have no doubt that siege turtles will look really cool in Guild Wars 2, even if they stick to a similar design. You know, they just render them a bit bigger and a bit more detailed or whatever. But Juggernauts could probably use a bit of a touch-up, so I think that'd be pretty fun. So yeah, really, that's the mission here. There's not much for me to talk about with the build either, but I really like what I made. The addition of the Flame Djinn is super cool, I think, because he has Immolate. That's his only skill, so he will be spamming Burn, and I'm making that Burn AoE, so it's kind of like he's Searing Flames, but without the, you know, the nuke part of it, which is really the iconic bit of Searing Flames, I admit. But he's, you know, he's basically an AoE Burn spammer, and because he has his own skill bar and his own entity, he overlaps with me. So right about when I'm smashing down You Move Like a Dwarf to put my cripple up, 15 seconds of AoE cripple and a knockdown and armor ignoring damage, by the way. Obviously, those last two bits aren't AoE. But right as I'm doing that, that's when his Immolate's landing. It just works so well. I really like this. I like this a lot. I reckon this could do quite well in hard mode as well, to be honest with you. So here, by the way, I actually just failed the Master challenge. I let these Luxon warriors get in, and I actually did let a Tree Singer die. So as much as I've whined about the this being boring or whatever, I've been so foolish in the way I'm playing. I actually let them die. I think you could just flag one defensive hero back here, and that pretty much deals with the whole mission. I'm kind of sad that the draft challenge is over, because when I was conceiving it, this was one of the missions I often had in my mind, because this is a mission that would greatly benefit from a party composition that is weak. So now it's a struggle, and now it's like Guild Wars 1 Prophecy's Thunderhead Keep, you know, where at launch, before all the power creep, and that was a really hard mission, and the devs actually had to directly nerf it down, and then the power creep further invalidated over the years. Well, imagine if we're late in the challenge here, and our team is, you know, not doing very well, and we're struggling. That would be cool. The challenge, though, the monster drafting challenge, you kind of get stronger as the game goes along, because you get more choice for monsters to pick, and you've curated your team a little bit more. And this mission is far too easy, to be honest. Another thing I don't like about its design, really, is as much as I applaud and enjoy the tension and the stakes that come from specific linear long-term experiences like this, where you can fail at the last moment and you're being asked to reinvest the full 20 minutes or whatever, as much as I like that, missions like this are kind of lame, where it's just boring, and then right at the end, the last wave is hard and you might wipe. And if that happens, then it's like, God damn it, man, I've got to wait 20 minutes of boring stuff again just to try the final little bit. That bit's a bit tricky, and I think that a reimagined game using Guild Wars 1's format in the 2020s would just have to be mindful of that little idea, that little, you know, you don't want the early areas of the game, of the mission, whatever it is, to be boring. What I think it should really be is the early areas of a mission, you can keep like a long mode of attritive gameplay experience where there's a lot of risk in the last moments, but have early mission sequences be the harder bits, and let a mechanic like death penalty and attrition add the tension towards the end. You know, your final boss doesn't have to be harder than your first boss. If anything, maybe the first boss should be hardest, just to load up that thing, and people can kind of, therefore, if you're wiping a lot, you're kind of wiping early, and there's just that little bit of fear there that doesn't necessarily manifest into a real experience too often. That way people avoid the frustration but keep the tension. I think that could work. Anyway, I'm probably rambling. Let's go to the strategy guide, see what the devs said. They do actually have a lot of lore information on this one, which is quite cool. And we'll read this as we wait for the mid cutscene for this mission. We go into phase 2. So they say this. This mission is only available to players who have committed to allying with the Kurzik faction. When you complete this mission, you go on to mission 13, which is one of the last ones of the game. You and your allies must join with the Kurziks to protect the Forever Trees. These trees are the only trees in the Echo-Valley Forest to survive the Jade Wind's effects, to a certain extent. The Forever Trees are an important part of the Kurzik religious beliefs, a sign that the gods never truly forsook them, even though the rest of the Echo-Valley Forest was turned to stone. But the Forever Trees cannot survive on their own. Their magical power must be reinforced periodically by the Tree Singers, Kurzik priests whose song keeps the Forever Trees alive. Each Forever Tree is surrounded by 4 Tree Singers, 12 total. I got that wrong just a minute ago. I thought it was 3, but it's 4. When all 4 Tree Singers surrounding a tree are killed, the tree dies too and reverts to stone. And by the way, I think there's actually a fun thing here where you can see it get petrified if you let them die. Most players won't, but it's kind of a fun little thing. Anyway, so we kill a lot of Luxons, and we get this mid cutscene, which develops the story a bit.
Here they come. More Luxons.
Haven't they had enough? Hold! They're waving the white flag.
The afflicted, they've returned. Nobody gets out of here alive unless we work together.
Baron Vosberg, he makes a good point. The Luxons are no longer the greatest threat to the Forever Trees. It couldn't hurt to have a few extra blades to help turn back the afflicted.
Until further notice, the Luxons are our allies. If anyone has an argument with this, speak it now, or forever hold your peace.
It's weird they talk like it's a wedding or something. It's so weird.
You stand with us now. Good. Now comes the hard part.
I guess that's just a part of what it means to be a part of the Kurzik culture, and the idea that you think Kurzik, I think you're supposed to think cathedrals and churches and weddings and funerals and all these kinds of, you know, reverential events. And they're just kind of layering a bit of that in with the dialogue there. I haven't talked about this either as well, but like the naming conventions of the Kurziks and the Luxons is all quite precisely tuned. You notice there's like quite a lot of Germanic names around in this area. Which I'm sure a lot of players appreciate. Many people forget this, but one of the largest player bases in Guild Wars 1 for a long time, the majority player base was a German player base. I know it's a game developed on the west coast of America, but it was Germans that really, really took to this. And I think to this day as well, I'm not surprised when I see a ton of German community members that are still around with this game and still are getting a real kick out of it. Maybe it's that whole thing of optimizing it and getting real efficiency out of your hero parties these days that people are really enjoying. By the way, did you see that for agility burst on the guy that was taking double damage? Oh, love fighting the afflicted, at least for that. Oh, they're so fun. All right, back to the strategy guide. They were talking about the tree singers and that the trees can die if the singers die. In addition to serving as a potent symbol of their special favor among the gods, the Forever Trees also create Kurzik juggernauts from human volunteers. Those who become juggernauts erase all sin from their souls, the Kurziks believe, and are honored for the rest of their existence. Your party will also be joined by Kurzik forest defenders, highly trained spellcasters who enhance the strength, speed, and defense of the heroes. This, however, is only the beginning. Before long, both Luxon attackers and Kurzik defenders will find themselves under attack from a small army of the afflicted, and will be forced to join together to defeat them. So the prominent heroes we have with us here is Danica. She's here to fill in the heroes regarding the tree singers and the Forever Trees. We have Baron Mirek Vasberg. The Baron could provide more history and background on the trees. He's who we spoke to earlier on in the mission, and he serves as a guardian of the heroes and the tree singers. Menlo's here, and they describe a little bit about the bosses and the things that we're fighting. So yeah, that's the idea of the mission, really, that halfway through, the Luxons become our allies. So I know it was just at the start of this video we were passing the information that apparently we're at war again, or the two factions are at war and that's what's important. And now all of a sudden we're not at war, because that's what they're doing. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? We have finally realized that the plague is a problem. There was a definite story that this campaign could have lent into more if it was a bit more sophisticated with its storytelling methods, which is the denial of the affliction. Especially in today, I think that would be a very interesting story. People who just ignore what is blatantly obvious around them, and then finally they are forced to fight together when death is on their doorstep. And so yeah, now we have this alliance. I will say, to the credit of factions, you guys watching this abridged series might think that, you know, that story beat, that reignition of the war and now the sudden closing of it again, is too short. You might feel that way on this abridged series, but don't forget that there was a whole phase where we should have been building faction and fighting at the Fort Aspenwood and the Jade Quarry and stuff. And so, you know, you wouldn't necessarily go between these two missions too quickly. It's actually interesting to look at the way factions handled this section of the plot, or right preceding this mission, because it's the kind of thing that the Guild Wars community was rebelling against. It was pretty much a grind phase. It was them saying, okay, you can't play the next bit of story until you grind out a bunch of faction. Go do it. Go kill random things. Go do side quests. I always thought that ArenaNet did those phases very well when they did, though, and they did more of them in the Nightfall campaign too. So what is there to say about the Afflicted here? Well, there's a few bosses. I think the order that they appear in might be a little bit random. I think there is one that I kind of struggle with a little bit later. But overall, there isn't, and that's mostly just a strange positioning thing. Because I'm playing a minion bomber setup right now, you do have to be careful about the minions positioning themselves. And if you run in too fast and the minions aren't there yet, well, the enemies aren't going to retarget to them. You're not going to get any Death Nova value. You're not going to get any Jagged Bones value. You're not going to get any Explosive Growth value. And you just get eaten alive. And I think that's what you're going to see happen to me a little bit here. But I take out that massive wave and it was pretty comfortable. Playing with minions is always like a way to invalidate Guild Wars 1, really. The thing about my comp that is a little bit deficit here is I didn't bring any Paragons. I mean, for a lot of this series, I was using Command Paragon secondaries, so I thought I'd change it up. But that does mean I don't get fall back and I don't get incoming. And those are really good for minions because they get them moving. They stop them falling behind because they affect all allies. So the minions get to move faster and are healing. They're pulsing their heals up, which means that we don't have to worry about blood is power too badly and killing ourselves with sacrificing blood, which I think I have the Master of Whispers on in this particular setup. The thing is, on a minion bomber setup, you don't really want to keep the minions alive anyway. You want them to die, but you still want them to move fast. It's just there's not any great other options. I mean, what, you're going to run charge on a warrior secondary and waste a whole elite on that? So here's where I die. So this is quite interesting. As you notice, none of the minions were there. So I balled up on the corner next to all these warriors that I hadn't blinded or had any ineptitude or anything up. And so, yeah, obviously we got hit pretty hard there, which was nice. I triple rezzed at once there with Biorule's hammer. So what's happening here is that's like AoE vengeance for the Guild Wars 2 players out there. Everyone's alive again for a temporary window now. They do more damage as well, for what it's worth. They're spellcasters, so it doesn't matter, but their physical attacks, they do more damage. And in 30 seconds, they're all going to die. So just in a moment, 3 of my players are just going to drop dead. But what's nice is we've won the fight in the meantime. We've restabilized, we've got energy back, so yeah, they die. I could run away from the fight now. I could make sure I don't aggro anything, and then we can resurrect at our leisure later. It can be a little bit fiddly as a skill, but I like Biorule's hammer, and it's one of the Guild Wars 1 community is really weird. Like, certain builds really had come into vogue in the name of optimization stuff, but certain other skills they just seem to have forgotten about completely. Biorule's hammer is one of those. I never see it being recommended. You know, people will recommend builds with an optional res slot or an optional final slot that don't have 3 PvE things, and they'll never list Biorule's hammer as a choice, a viable choice. But it's a cool skill, a fun skill, especially on melee oriented comps. I saw a really interesting idea of a ranger composition as well, which uses jagged horror minions. Not jagged horror minions, sorry, bone fiend minions, which are ranged minions, and in that case you do want to keep them alive, and they just stand there DPSing from the backline, just shooting and plinking away, and use like the Eben Vanguard standards. I kind of want to play that. You might see that in an upcoming video. Anyway, this is the end of the mission. The Afflicted Zenzo is the final boss that I have to take out, and that's the Eternal Grove, really. I started as a Luxon player, so I don't have much nostalgia for this mission, frankly. But that's how it's played. Pretty standard defense in the world of today, where we're all pretty strong. And yeah, I only protected 11 Tree Singers ago, so I actually missed Master. How embarrassing. But hey, I mean, I was being pretty flippant about the whole thing. So they have it. Let's see what everybody has to say. That charred pile of Afflicted there. And we will move on to one of the last missions of the game.
Look at this mess.
So, are you ready to believe now?
Believe what?
That Shiro has returned.
It's hard to argue with the evidence littered here at our feet.
Then it's settled? You'll help us gather the Kurziks together to fight Shiro?
Yes, we are with you.
Even if that means fighting alongside the Luxons?
Until Shiro has been destroyed, we will look upon the Luxons as our allies.
Well then, I think our work here is done. Let us go find Master Togo.
If you're looking for Master Togo, you will find him with our champion, Argo, at the Harvest Temple.
Then we must go to the Harvest Temple.
So they did something sneaky there as well, which you can probably read between the lines. As you might expect, the equivalent mission, the Gala Hatchery, has a similar end, where we decide to go to the Harvest Temple. Why do we do that on the other side? Well, because the Kurziks are there. So the Kurziks go because the Luxons are there. The Luxons go because the Kurziks are there. Why did we go there? Well, the devs cop out on that one. No one player would realize from just playing their half, but obviously once you've done both, you kind of get a sense for that. So yeah, that's the end of the Eternal Grove. Actually took a lot longer than I thought it was going to. We end up at the Vasberg Armory, another cool location to me. It's one of these places where often you'd find decent skills were available. I'd love to see this come back in the sequel somehow. Also, it was just such a gargantuan, awesome, like, outpost. It feels like this outpost is what the Arborstone, the Cathedral Zuhautzal, would have been like if it hadn't fallen into ruin and was actually safe for us to travel around in. Like, this place is just epic and immense. Love to see what they did it with the sequel, similar to how, like, the Bone Hall, the Bone Palace, sorry, Bone Hall. The Bone Palace in the Desolation kind of got a big update in the sequel. Love to see something here. Also, you could now enter the Morning Vale Falls map, which was filled with interesting elite skills to get, especially returning back to the Eternal Grove as an explorable map. There are lots of goat creatures in this area of the forest called Gaki. And also, when we were in Xingji, there was a type of creature you never saw in the main story, but called mantises. And their sort of upgraded version... Sorry, on Xingji Island, there were mantids. And now, out here in the forest, in these lower areas of the forest, you find tons of mantises, which actually have stronger builds, more interesting cards if you can draw them in the draft game that I built. And so the idea really was that they were like a plague that was building up. You learn about that on Xingji, and then you actually end up finding a lot of them here. By the way, all those NPCs running in a long line there is because I'm the only player that spawned here for like a long time, so me coming here triggered them to run through. But so yeah, I'll head out into the Morning Vale Falls just so you guys can have a little quick peek here. I used to love this map. Yeah, there were higher tier wardens around. There was a nice little river running through. And look at the background there. Look at what the canopy looks like. The colors, the sort of subtle blurring. I think this place is fantastic. Such a cool experience of the Echovald Forest. Quintessentially Echovald Forest, this map feels to me. Then you had one final optional outpost before heading through the Moristav Trail to the Unwaking Waters. But before that, we are going to be seeing the other side of the story in something of a bonus episode, I suppose you might consider. I'll give you guys the Jade Sea, where I'm actually going to spend a little bit more time out on the maps, because I really want you guys to see the various creatures and dragons that were actually inhabiting the Jade Sea and some of the more beautiful areas, because I haven't been able to just yet. So that'll be in the next part as we figure out what exactly happened if we had chosen to dedicate to those people. I'll see you guys for that one next time.